I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like live right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Welcome to everybody joining us live, to those who will be seeing this later, and to those who will now be hearing this later on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. Big shout out to brother Jordan, who's been helping our entire BPM platform slowly start to grow and expand, and in some ways catch up to the past by getting set up now on Spotify, and I think in another few days we'll be on all the other ones. So if that is your preferred method and want to get this in an audio form only, please add BPM. I Mix What I Like and all the other shows that are coming up, including Riot Starter, who, by the way, has a special coming up later today, I believe. So stay tuned. I think tonight at 8 p.m. Kalanji's got a special Riot Starter. But really, the best thing just to do, just in general, of course, is to like, join, subscribe, and then hit that bell to get all the notifications for all the lives that are coming up on our channel here. We have some soon to be announced more news about the expansion of our channel, some other collaborations coming up. So our forthcoming monthly political prisoner hit on Ben Dixon's show is continuing, and more to come. There's more things happening. Actually, several expansive things happening. As was announced on the remix the other morning, the channel has crossed 12,000 subscribers, so we definitely appreciate that, and definitely encourage that you all help us bring more folks on board. If you caught Real Talk with Dr. Sundiata Keita last night, where I was the fortunate and honored guest, you heard us talk about a potential other project BPM might take up, specifically a think tank research thing, project. So in other words, when you subscribe and join and become a member to the channel, there's it's, again, not that it's necessarily wrong for people to, on an individual basis, side hustle or earn a living doing this, but here, for the most part, you are helping expand something that is almost exclusively designed and being developed to add something different and special to our media diet and our environment for the African world, the Black world specifically, and other forward-thinking human beings that want to get down with the program, that want to and be on board. So in other words, you're participating in a collective effort is what it is, if that helps. So please do invite others to come on in and join us. Greetings to those like the new millennium. I get it. My bad. I'm slow. Okay, I get it. We appreciate you. The new millennium. I get it. Okay, Lonnie would be the name then. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. Greetings, Franny French, Lisa, saludos también, Deborah, KD, Brother Tafari, beautiful people indeed. Peace, Ricky, Roz, Elbow. What's going on? Greetings to you as well. Morning, morning, morning. Love my fro. Indeed. I used to have a nice one too, by the way. Quiet as kept. And I did love it. But Mother Nature has her ways, and you know, we are where we are. But be more Akuma. And again, shout out and thanks again to Dr. Sundiata last night. I enjoyed. I had a great time last night. Salute to you as well, Anthony. Bigging up on his show. Yeah, I definitely want us to have a word to say about your boy, the Klerk. Yeah, they trying to humanize your boy. Yeah, we should talk about that as well. Leah, Nathaniel Turner, greetings, Comrade P, no doubt. And my man is in the building. So welcome to you, Brother Kaba. Good to see you. Oh, and then he stepped out of the building right on time. Anyway, good to see you, my man. How you doing?
See me now?
We see you and hear you. By the way, just before we move on, I'm hanging in there and I'm excited because tonight is this a World Cup qualifier? I think this is it's USA playing Mexico.
Oh Lord.
So of course I had to get my Panama shirt. Right. So I got to get ready for the game tonight. It's a big game tonight. Big rivalry. USA versus Mexico. Big football showdown. You know.
Did we lose that ball?
Huh? What happened? You don't hear me?
I showed that I'm still on, but I don't know if Dr. Bus still there.
Yeah, I'm here. So, all right, hold on. Let me get Kaba together because I'm here. Can you hear me? Anyway, yeah. It's gonna be a big showdown tonight. The big rivalry. 9 p.m. Eastern. And oh man, anyway, so Kaba and I let's try again and see if can you hear me? Do you see and hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, cool.
And is there something playing in the background? Do you have something on in the background?
No. Can you hear something?
Yeah. And when I mute you, it goes away. It's like you have something in the background, like a TV or a radio or something. Somebody's talking or
let me check around here.
It's or there's something maybe playing through your computer on another application. But in any event, we have a number of things that we're going to get to today. And I was going to say, Kaba and I haven't had a chance to really, largely my fault, haven't had a chance to pregame things as we usually do. But there's a number of things that I'd like to get to today, including to Klerk, talk a little bit about the CIA's latest efforts in Cuba. A little bit. I know Sister Jackie had a great program. Was that last night too? Man, everything's blending together. Yeah, last night, Jackie had a great program, Lippmann Nation, on the Biden tax cuts. We're going to look at that just for a little bit more this morning as well. Got a word or two to say more about what was Veterans Day yesterday. And then we're going to check back with my man Math Hoffa's show. And a piece of a conversation he had with Hasan Campbell, and something where I think I found a point of disagreement with my man Math Hoffa. Just a little one, but just something I thought. But in which is really a small piece of a much more fascinating and powerful conversation they were having. So we'll look at that a little bit. Of course, going to look a little bit at the defense resting in the Rittenhouse trial. And then if we have time, I started watching, haven't finished it, but maybe start a conversation around Netflix again, delving into the struggles of Black folks here with a revival of the classic book. Was it Nellie Larson, right? On Passing. I read that years ago, but started watching that, and I don't know, maybe start formulating some thoughts around that. So let's try again. How's that? Are you yeah, I still hear whatever that is, but
I don't know what it is, man. I don't
you don't hear it?
No. I don't hear anything.
Yeah, I definitely hear it. Like there's like a TV
it,
playing in the background. It's like there's some sound playing. It's like a woman talking, in fact, specifically, it sounds like to me.
Wow.
Do you have an application playing in the background somewhere? Do you have something else playing?
No. I closed out everything.
Because when I mute you, it definitely goes away. So it's something playing in the background over there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but anyway, we'll survive. It's survivable.
What about now?
Oh yeah, that's good. You got it.
I think I found it. It was something that was plugged in like through some headphones or something. It was
yeah. There you go. That's right. Yeah. Right. All right. So perfect. We good to go.
By the way,
yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you for your service, man.
And you as well. Yes. Hey, so I mean,
I still know how to salute.
Oh man,
the proper way.
I still have I still have some traumatic memories around the salute specifically, and one in particular where this little, it's like if there was ever going to be a movie about my experience, this scene would be in the joint. Like it was. So I don't know if you had it, if your situation was exactly the same, but for us, they used to, the rule was, when you are crossing paths of an officer, you obviously have to salute. Now, the caveat was if you had your hands full and you were carrying something related specifically to work,
right,
you were exempted from having to salute. So one day I'm having to take the trash off the ship, and I'm walking down the pier, and I had 2 bags, but they weren't big, they weren't heavy. And at the time, initially, I had them both in my left hand as I was walking. I might have been trying to get something in my pocket or something, or just whatever. But as I saw this officer coming, this little punk ass white boy that I had known or just seen in and about on the ship, just his whole vibe. I didn't know him. I just didn't. I know what you mean. Just that whole, you know what I mean? And even other officers would make fun of this type of character, the punk who didn't even go to like who just went to Annapolis, who just went to the college, and just, like, has no physical capabilities, no strength about their character. They just went to college and got the officer thing. And this dude comes, and and we're a good distance. I thought we were good enough distance away, and I thought I was going to get away with it. So I shifted one of the bags into my right hand so that both of my hands were full. He saw me do it, and we made eye contact. And it was like that scene. I was thinking that scene, not that I'm a big fan of The Wire, but there was that scene where the main thug, Marlowe, I think, goes into the corner store, and the brother's a security guard, and he just makes eye contact and steals something like a lollipop or something in front of the just something to let the security guard know, I see you and I don't care, and I'm going to steal in front of you. And it forces the security guard to dip into his manhood, confront Marlowe. Of course, the security guard ends up getting killed. That we had that kind of moment where we made eye contact, and it was like, yeah, I know you saw me and you know what I'm doing. And he was like, I know you trying to get away. And he stopped me, man. And he said something to the effect of, like, put the bag back in your other hand and salute. And I did it. And I did it. And to this day, it was one of those moments. Is this it? Is this that moment? Is this the time where I snap and go to the brig? Is this the time where, you know, like one of those moments in life where you just have that, this is a clear fork in the road moment. Because if I don't do this, he is definitely going to cause a problem. And he definitely sees in my face, which is what I really think it was. He saw in my face that I do not want to salute you. I do not respect you. And I actually would like to punch you in the mouth. Like, that's what I think he could see. And he made me do it. And I did it. And then I picked up the trash and walked down the pier and dumped the trash. I will never, ever get over that, man. That little indignity, that microaggression that we talked about before. Shout out to Chester Pierce. Anyway, so anyway, yeah, I do know how to salute. God damn it! And it's
well, in cases like that, I had been known to salute like this. And for those, yes, you're not supposed to. For those who don't know, you're not supposed to salute with the left hand. And then actually it worked many times with such individuals as you described. In the rare instance where it did not go over, I would always say, "Oh, my apologies, sir," and do it like
that's it,
like that. Kind of like I would always kind of lead with I would always kind of make sure that this particular finger was exposed, even if I got it together at some point. There would always be a "fuck you," somewhere.
Man!
And they kind of knew what was up, but they couldn't really get mad because I was like, well, I was just because I could just say, well, I was just trying to get. I was startled. I was trying to get it together, and so they never really.
It was a lot of that kind of stuff for me.
I hated that shit. And I could not wait to get up out of there, man. I could not wait to do my time and get up out of there. I said, there's no way in hell I'm gonna ever put myself in a situation where I have these kind of people who have that kind of sway over my life. It will never happen again. And I've been in situations of jobs since where I've just walked off. I just left because I'm like, I'm not putting up with this. If I left that situation, I would go to jail. You know what I mean? You could potentially get locked up.
Sure.
But in no other circumstance, work circumstance, is that the case. And I said, I will never ever put myself in that position again. And none of my children will either. I don't care if they're 40 or 50 years old. You are not joining the military. Okay. They got my daddy. They got my granddaddy. They're not going to get the rest. That's it. The buck stops right here. It's no more. That's it.
Yeah, man. They got my father. They got my uncle. They got me. I mean, they got, like enough. Same thing with the word superior. I would never use that word either. I would always say supervisor, someone who outranks me, something like that. I just would not. Anyway, there was just a lot of that. So yeah. But what I do just so yesterday I took the time, the opportunity to share, every year I share the same piece that I wrote years ago for Black Agenda Report. Just arguing that we redefine Veterans Day as a support for our ongoing struggle around political prisoners and those who would be made political prisoners in the future. And folks can get that at imixwhatilike.org. Enough of all of that. That's it. So I was telling folks while we were getting our stuff together, Brother Kaba, that we hadn't, and it was largely my fault. We didn't pregame as much this week, in part because, as I've been saying, I don't have, fortunately, and not to make light of it, but fortunately I don't have COVID, but I do have kids, and who bring around enough germs, and they sure enough got us caught up a little bit this week and slowed me down. Nothing serious, just hard to focus when you're all clogged up and runny and coffee and all that kind of stuff. So, but I did, there was a couple things that I know I wanted to get to with you, starting with Veterans Day. Wanted to also ask you what you thought about the Klerk and a couple of other things, but
I was actually going to bring that up, so I'm glad somebody did. I saw somebody brought that up.
But I actually wanted to be, even before we get there, to sort of segue with I got to hear a good bulk of your show this week, WPFW, Mondays 3 to 5, African Deep Thought, Jazz and Justice, and some of your conversation with Mama Charlotte, Charlotte O'Neill. So I just wanted to give you a second to give us a few words or thoughts on that. I had a chance to meet her and Pete some years ago on my first trip to the continent and see their lovely compound out there in Tanzania. Very inspirational. So anyway, but so it was good to hear from her. And there's an event that she's doing today, right?
Yeah. Mama Charlotte is just she's just a beautiful African, man. I never met her, but I mean, just her spirit. I mean, you can just feel it. She's just a wonderful person, man. And I first heard about her, of course, years ago. And then there was this documentary that a Panther in Africa that kind of talked about Baba Pete, but also of course covered her as well. That came out years ago on PBS, and it's definitely worth checking out. Never been to Tanzania, and I definitely have to make a trip the next time I go back to the continent because it's. But anyway, we talked about a lot of things. Just her, how they got to where they were, their time in the Panthers, the compound itself, them learning from scratch, not knowing anything about Tanzania, how they got there, the channels through which they had to go to get to Tanzania. They had to plan to go there, but they ended up there. The fact that Tanzanians were so welcoming of them, welcoming them back home to Africa. Her finding out that some of her family ancestry actually went back to Tanzania. Her poetry, and she even shared some poetry, which is a mix of prose and poetry, spoken word, I guess more specifically. It was just a great conversation, and it went by. It was an hour and a half, but it went by so fast. It was just wonderful to talk to her. So she's doing an event today with one of the Yoruba houses here, one of the spiritual houses here in DC, Ile Imole, IleImole.com. You can go there and check out the stream, or you can just go to Ile Imole. I believe they have the stream that's going to be on. It may be on social media like Facebook or something like that. But definitely, if you go to the website, you can find out more about it and how you could maybe register. I think they have limited spaces. I've been honored. I'm actually going to be there physically to check it out as well. But she's doing a tour basically. She landed in Kansas City, which is where she's from. Talked about the fact how her and Baba Pete met as well. He was from Kansas City, Missouri. She was from Kansas City, Kansas, right across the line. It was just a great conversation, man. And she's going to be going more in depth about, some of the things that they've been doing today during the program.
Right on. Yeah, no, that was fantastic. So as a segue from Panthers in Africa to I couldn't come up with it fast enough. Something more virusy in Africa, and the whole Klerk.
A predator from a panther to a predator.
There you go. From a panther to a predator. There you go. That's it. You got to. I mean, do
you have the headline? Do you have the headlines? The headline? Do you have that?
Yeah, I do have. I actually do have.
Okay.
I do actually have some. You can share something too if you like, but I do have.
Well, I was going to share a headline.
Yeah, I just have the Klerk, the BBC News, the man who still divides South Africa, which I actually thought was one of the more honest, at least headlines coming out of the mainstream press in terms of a reflection on this man. But because so much of it has been praising him, as a co-awardee of the Nobel Peace Prize, of having led South Africa out of apartheid, of having stood up to the recalcitrant whites who refused to advance into the new era. I mean, all of this on and on and on, and almost nothing about the current state of Africa, number one, South Africa, number one, the current state of Black South Africans, more specifically. Certainly nothing about whatever his relationship was to not only just the violence in general and apartheid in general, but the specifics of, for instance, the assassination of Chris Hani. all kinds of stuff like that gets left out. And then this whole thing about him going to meet Mandela and the back channel meetings to get Mandela out, and his first meeting with him and being impressed at how tall Mandela was. And I mean, just all this nonsense. And anyway, so a headline that acknowledged that people are still to this day actually divided, in part because so many whites don't like, even to this day, don't like that he ended the official state policy of apartheid. I mean, anyway, so just my first run of thoughts. Yeah.
So the piece that I wanted to share was just this one right here.
Okay.
And I'm gonna
yeah, let me see.
Here we go.
Did you share it?
Yeah, I'm doing it now.
All
right. Okay. Just there we go. Okay, I'm showing to share it, and then it's
I don't see anything.
Okay, it says entire screen window. I'm sharing.
Yeah, pick the window. And now, did you freeze up?
And it's now not good. I see what I did wrong.
I see what I did. Freezing up too. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there it is.
Okay, you see it now? Oh, you see me now.
Yeah, but okay, there it is. There you go. There it is.
All right. So this is the thing right here that I was, and I'm it's a paywall here, but just this, F.W. Klerk, president who ended apartheid.
Yeah, that's right.
Dies at 85. As you just mentioned. But then at the same, and this is the New York Times now. This is the paper of record, right? But then when I saw this, I thought about like that in juxtaposition to like this, former Nazi guard to stand trial in Germany over thousands of camp murders. I thought about like this is what we should have seen.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah,
his ass should have been. Not getting a Nobel Prize. This would have been his prize right here. Is something like that.
So I'm glad you brought this up. That's a really good point, and it's something I always bring this up when this issue comes up. It's important to remember, as Desmond Tutu pointed out. So when he published some biography of his or an autobiography. This would have had to have been in the 90s because it came out before I was in grad school and before he came to the Africana Center to give us a special talk after he spoke to the whole university. And in the two things that I think are relevant from that, well, two and a half. One, in his book that had come out. What I'll say this with two things, because he makes reference to the point he made in his book in this exchange. There was a brother from one of the townships in South Africa that challenged him after his talk with us, and basically through choking back tears and all this other stuff, was saying as has been borne out through data and statistics still coming out to this day, that Black South Africans are materially worse off now than under apartheid. That things have not gotten better. That outside of the creation of course, a Black bourgeoisie, in the expansion of the Black bourgeoisie, the masses of Black people have not improved. And so he was challenging Tutu's sort of presentation, but Tutu made this what I thought was an honest and important point, because he was asked this to make this comparison or respond to the comparison you're raising this morning often. And in his book, which I remember having read before then, and then he brought up in that exchange as well, he says, you couldn't expect that there would be Nuremberg style trials after our experience in South Africa because we did not win. We did not win. At best, he was saying we drew. It was a stalemate. And that's why you had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that didn't lead to any material redistribution, no punishments, no nothing. Just come to the table, say, I'm sorry. stare some people in the face and say, I'm sorry. And then we go back to the, but that was, I thought, an important point. The Nazis were defeated.
And cry and all of that. Yeah. And I've heard that point. I've heard that point, and that never sat well with me. And he's right. He's right. They didn't win. But why was Nazism defeated? How did Nazism get defeated? It got defeated because the Western powers, with the help of black men like my grandfather, who I just mentioned, who fought in World War II, who could not eat in the mess hall like the German Nazi soldiers who were caught and captured, were able to eat in the mess hall, unlike the black officers during World War II. That's just a small thing, but it was because of the help of the same West that now is championing this South African so-called victory. They didn't do the things that were necessary in order to make that victory possible in the same ways that they did to make sure that the Nazis were defeated. So yes, it is true. But I think that's a point that needs to be pointed out, is that they didn't win. The Nazis weren't defeated by the Jews per se. They were defeated by other white people who decided to come in and help them. Now, I'm not saying that we should have expected. I'm not saying that we should have expected the West to come in and help Africa. But I'm saying that if you're going to make that point that what's his name made, what's the priest's name? You just said his name, Tutu. That Tutu made. Then you also have to bring in that caveat too, as well.
No, I fully agree.
Is not helping us out the way they help them out. So
in fact,
it's really benign neglect. Yeah.
But that's really my point, though. That people keep reflecting on the end of apartheid as some sort of victory for African people and others, and that's not what it was. It was an adjustment, a relabeling, and a rebranding, so that more wealth and power could be extracted from the same, for the same people, from the same people. Yeah. The other thing is that the only thing I would want to add to your point about the Second World War is that it wasn't even just, it certainly was not Jews that defeated Nazis, and it wasn't even just the West, but it was the West who were at the time allies with the Soviet Union, with Russia, who really beat the Nazis. They're the ones who, it was even more than the United States, more than Britain. It was the Soviet
Union.
Beef. They had
the
Russians.
Beef
that's right. Yeah. And they paid more of a. They lost 20 million some people fighting the Nazis. So they but they don't want it. But nobody wants to give them credit because now they're the Cold War and continuing enemy. But Russia, So anyway, but to your point, as my black father also fought in that war, experienced firsthand, was mistreated, as was my Jewish uncle who fought in that war, won medals for valor and all this other kind of stuff, and had to fight his own white compatriots who attacked him as a Jew, thinking that he was some subhuman and sub whatever, what do they call Gentile. So anyway, but anyway,
and the last part on that too is us, is where we come in, I think, too, as just African people, is that we're just way too forgiving. That's another reason why I showed that Nazi piece. Because we just want to move on and welcome to the new South Africa. That was the old days. This is the new, pretending like everything is fine. Like, to your point, that it was not really a victory, because when we look at the conditions of our people, South Africa it mirrors the West when it comes to a lot of the issues that it has. They had gang problems. They got, right. Even with COVID, they got higher COVID rates than other parts of Africa. They just mirror the West all around.
I there's this channel, this Asian dude, Jake Tran. I know some in our audience know of this character, this YouTuber. He makes some fascinating videos, and one of his more recent ones was on an issue that I had never even heard about in South Africa, which is the taxi gangster wars, that apparently the battles over the taxi industry are among the most violent and mafia style gangland ran type, and he shows the numbers that the millions of people use them. There's a lot of money coming through, but the drivers, of course, make the least. They have to fight for customers, literally gun battle each other for customers. I mean, and it's crazy. So to the extent that this video is accurate, I don't want to, I don't, and honestly, I had never even heard of this as an specific issue. It was just another sign of the failures of this post-apartheid era, which is again why I mean I wanted to at least mention, like, again, as others have pointed out, you got to kill Chris Hani before you let Mandela just come running out free, unfettered, without the radical option still there, reminding him that this new South Africa was not what we were fighting for. And it is not so new. But anyway, I mean, yeah.
And you had to kill Mr. I write what I like.
Oh, absolutely. Steve Biko in advance of all that. I mean, of course, absolutely.
Because I think they knew at some point that apartheid was going to have to end at some point. They knew that. And so they said, well, if this is going to end, we can't have these people like this around. We can't have these revolutionaries around. We got to get them out of here beforehand, and then we can get people who are a little more amenable, who are a little more malleable. People like Tutu. And Tutu said some strong things. He said some strong things but at the same time, he's more reasonable. And we don't need, when you need a revolutionary, you don't need people who are reasonable. Per se, and not, at least not in that regard. Reasonable maybe in some revolutionary ways, but not if the enemy thinks that you're reasonable, then you're not reasonable.
I mean, at
least you're not useful.
And and I'm no expert on this either, but I've also known over the years that Tutu's congregation was largely white. He was not coming out of the black radical religious congregations or whatever. So I mean, it stands to reason that he would take a lot of the positions that he took. And as he even acknowledged when he was at Cornell, I mean, and this was part of the challenge from the brother in the audience from one of the townships, was that you go on these tours to these major universities and get this bag, as they would say today, but where's the bag going as it relates to the rest of us? And Tutu's point was, largely, we need the support of these major institutions. So, for instance, he didn't acknowledge during that visit when I was at the university that Cornell did not divest from apartheid South Africa. Like, he left that part out because he was now being invited back with a big speaker's fee to tell everybody how things had been improving. Largely because
he didn't want them to divest from giving him that fee. He didn't make that kind of divestment.
And I know our audience is aware of this, but I was for years largely incredibly naive about the hustle that is the college speaking tour circuit. There is a lot of money that gets handed out to people to go and say what the elites at these universities want to hear. So I mean, it's crazy. So. All right. Anyway, so as I was saying, we didn't pregame today as much. So I don't know if there were some issues that you definitely wanted to bring up, but there, and I'm happy to we on the fly pick them. But there was one thing I wanted to raise that I forgot even in the intro to bring up before you came on, because my study group in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, my work study circle, is reading The World in Africa now. DuBois is The World in Africa, and which is funny. I'm glad I still had my book, and I was reminded of all the things I've forgotten, because, like, I mean, I don't know if people can see, but like, this is when I was really trying to be neat and keep all my notes in the margins and not mess up the text, and so like I was really doing it back in the day. But there was something I wanted to raise with you in particular and our audience here, because in our reading, there was a discussion of Du Bois is talking about his efforts during World War I. Because remember, so to just quickly, so I think most of our audience is aware of this. The overall point of Du Bois's book here is to remind people of the centrality of the African continent to the global economy, and to why the Western world has put so much effort into imperial, engagement in conquering of the continent, and to remind people specifically, even as we were just talking about these world wars, that the real purpose of the world wars were the African colonies, and that the reason Germany started up with World War I was because they didn't like their initial piece of the Great Cake. The reason they started up with World War II was because of the punishment for having started World War I was to lose their colonies, and they wanted to conquer Europe to get back into Africa to get the real power and the real resources, right? So that was the whole point of Du Bois. Well, I mean, one of his whole points. I mean, the other is to remind African people of our central role to civilization and all of that. But there is this one point that I thought was fascinating. And I had never really thought of before. So I wanted to ask you and our august audience about this, because Du Bois gets a lot of criticism. One, rightfully so, by the way, for his famous World War I call to what was it? Circle the wagons. Was that the famous phrase or something to that effect? Where he wanted us to rally around white folks in the United States. I see Kaba is okay. He's coming and going. Is that what's going on here? What happened? Let's see which one is working and which one isn't. All right, I think we lost, brother. I think okay, there you go.
But all kinds of technical
problems. So
if I apologize.
It's cool. So if folks remember, right, Du Bois had during World War I encouraged everybody, Black people, to circle the wagons or whatever and rally around the United States effort to get into World War I and to support the war effort. And and he even took a post within the U.S. military to carry out that goal. And I agree with all of those who have been critical of this choice of his over the years. But there was one part that I don't remember ever considering or hearing discussed in that he raises here. So first of all, he's talking about his involvement with the Creel Commission, which I don't remember remembering, even though I have notes about it in here from years ago, and his engagement with Walter Lippmann. So now this is where I have to admit, so like last night on with brother Dr. Sundiata, when he was asking me how I got into the PhD in communication, I admitted to him that it was never like the grand plan, and it was really Dr. Todd Stephen Burroughs, my main man, bringing me over to the University of Maryland after I had been told by Howard that they lost my application to the PhD history department, PhD program. Had to go teach a year of high school in the interim, and was just wanting to get a PhD. Didn't really care. I had gone to the Africana Studies of Research Center at Cornell under Dr. James Turner, and had already been declared that whatever my PhD was going to be in service of the Africana Studies project. So I just didn't care. I just wanted a PhD so I could get into teaching, and then whatever the discipline was in name would be fashioned to this political project anyway, and which has largely been the case. But what I like about having gone through the PhD program in journalism and public communication or mass media, whatever it was officially called by the time I finished, is some of the introduction and really over time deep engagement with some of these histories of the development of journalism, professional and otherwise, commercial media, and the role that it was meant to play in terms of propaganda, psychological warfare, counterinsurgency, surveillance, etc. So one of those, and Walter Lippmann, whose famous book of the 1921, somewhere around there, called Public Opinion, right? That was it, Public Opinion. which I always remember referencing because he said white people have to depict black people negatively as a self-defense mechanism for whites, right? That was one point he was making. But he also talked about the power that journalism had in shaping the mind's eye of people around the world. And he would often use the example of people continuing to fight in war, not having received the message that the war was over. And this became for Lippmann, and people who would study Lippmann for years subsequently, important to the study of how media and journalism can be used to manipulate. This is my interpretation of what they were saying, at least, can and should be used to manipulate the masses in favor of a dominant elite who are by destiny, training, education, whiteness, richness, properly designated to rule. All right. So, but Du Bois, and I didn't remember, Du Bois comes across Walter Lippmann during his travels in defense of or promoting World War I. And he even mentions, he says, Walter Lippmann wrote me in his crabbed hand, February 20th, 1919, I'm very much interested in your organization of the Pan-African Conference and glad that Clemenceau has made it possible. Will you send me whatever reports you may have on the work? Now, we should come back to this at some point, what Lippmann was, why he was interested and why Du Bois was engaged with him at that time. I think this is during Du Bois's mistaken period, or one of his mistaken periods, where he's getting too close with the federal government and too close with the American project. And you know, so I don't know why he would have been so engaged or trusting of Lippmann, although Lippmann was considered by many at the time as a progressive because of his engagement in a positive way with Russia, who hadn't yet become the enemy of the United States pre-World War II. So, I mean, but then he also, that is, Du Bois also makes mention of his he says here, whoops. I'm sorry, y'all. This to me was so fascinating. I thought this was so fascinating. And I didn't kick Kaba out. He apparently is struggling with the tech and will be back as soon as he can. But Du Bois says here, by indirection, I secured passage on the Creel press boat, the Orizaba, and landed in France in December 1918. I went with the idea of calling a Pan-African Congress and to try to impress upon the members of the peace conference sitting at Versailles the importance of Africa in the future world. So I find it interesting that he's engaged with Walter Lippmann and George Creel. Probably at the time when I first read this, I didn't know who Creel and Lippmann were. That probably is why it didn't sink in at the time, and why it's so fascinating to me revisiting the book. That makes sense. Now that makes sense. Because remember, as we talked about previously on this show, George Creel, in his own explanation of how, in a book I think he was titled "How We Sold the War," in other words, how did the George Creel and the Creel Commission convince white Americans to go fight in World War I when nobody wanted to? Obviously, nobody wants to go to war. The people who actually fight war don't want to go to war. The people who don't benefit materially from war don't want to go to war. But the rich need to know how to make you go to war to fight wars for them. So Creel put the whole commission together, the whole distribution of people around the country, the use of press and even video clippings and just all kinds of to promote sending thousands of people out, the 4-minute men and all that. In this context for them is a good thing because it's a speedy way of delivering a message as opposed to, you know, but giving these speeches to, you know, and of course Du Bois is, but, and this is what I thought, this is really where I'm getting to, which I thought is fascinating. And I'm wondering if Du Bois, I don't know, maybe deserves some credit he hasn't gotten for this, or I haven't, I don't know. And shout out, I don't know if they're being heard here, but shout out to trash collectors and the working people in sanitation and elsewhere. Big ups. So Du Bois says but Du Bois then explains, all right, so he's criticized for supporting World War I, siding up with George Creel, Walter Lippmann, which I think is fascinating and a whole set of wild contradictions. Because Du Bois, in effect, becomes part of the propaganda machinery that George Creel was set in motion under Woodrow Wilson to generate support for U.S. entrance into the war. But Du Bois, and I wrote here a note that I said was African Zionism. I was writing a question to myself, was this akin to African Zionism? Because what Du Bois is ultimately saying he's there to do, kind of on the low. I tried to get a conference with President Wilson, but got only as far as Colonel House, who was sympathetic but non-committal to his Pan-African. The Chicago Tribune of January 1919, in a dispatch from Paris dated December 30th, 1918, said, an Ethiopian utopia to be fashioned out of the German colonies is the latest dream of leaders of the Negro race who are here at the invitation of the United States government as part of the extensive entourage of the American peace delegation. Robert R. Moulton, successor of the late Booker Washington as head of Tuskegee Institute, Dr. William E.B. Du Bois, editor of The Crisis, are promoting a Pan-African conference to be held here during the winter, while the peace conference is at full blast. It is to embrace Negro leaders from America, Abyssinia, Liberia, Haiti, the French and British colonies, and others of part of the Black world. Its object is to get out of the peace conference an effort to modernize the dark continent and in the world reconstruction to provide international machinery looking toward civilization of the African natives, end quote. So is Du Bois to be given any credit for trying to create an African Zionist movement? That was the question that I was just wanting to, they don't use that phrase Zionism, obviously. And I did a quick look. I don't remember. I couldn't find anything. I was trying to find a reference to Theodore Herzl by Du Bois. I'm sure there has to be some. I just didn't find it. So if anybody's aware of it, I'll check the chat later on or send me a message directly or whatever. But I'd be curious if Du Bois, now I want to get into that a little bit. Did Du Bois study the Zionism of the claims of Theodore Herzl? Brother Kaba, I think you froze out again. Yeah, okay. But was that, I mean, I remember vaguely thinking of this years ago, because obviously I wrote down African Zionism, but I don't remember following up on this point or learning more about it specifically or focusing on it. Du Bois's intent or the part of the project idea of engaging George Creel and Woodrow Wilson and accepting a role promoting U.S. engagement in World War I. And maybe that was more overtly understood at the time, and I'm just not remembering for whatever reason, but or just didn't study enough Du Bois. But was he doing that to try to work something out to get Black people some freedom, some decolonized space to exist? And if, again, flawed as it may be, tactically or otherwise, if that was ultimately the goal, I think Du Bois deserves, some rethought there on that one as well. So anyway, is brother, are you back? How we doing?
I hope so, man. This has been a wild day, but we're gonna make it work.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Right on. Yep.
Okay.
Hear you, see you fine.
I did hear what you said about Du Bois, and I think we have the benefit of history to look back on, hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of our people at one point, they believed, obviously that politics, would save us. And some people still do. Obviously, these endure. People thought the education would save us. Obviously, the economic piece, people think, that's going to save us. So, and I think Du Bois is kind of like a microcosm of that. He went through a whole lot of different changes. You can read some of his stuff early on where he disagrees with himself, later on, so he lived a long time. So he was going, and he lived at a particular time when a lot of this consciousness was changing, was emerging, and so forth. But I think he had the right intention, I guess, and they say the road to hell, but I think he had the right intentions in terms of trying to do what at the time might have been most feasible, or even in some cases, the way some people think may have thought at the time revolutionary, in terms of in using the military as a means by which we could kind of gain some kind of favor, if you will. And we know that a lot of brothers came back and got lynched in their uniforms too, who believed the same thing. So I think what he was saying was really he was just expressing a general feeling, a general sentiment among a lot of Black people in America, particularly around the war, that this is another way, like education, like all those other things that I mentioned, that we can prove ourselves, so to speak, through the war. Of course, not necessarily having the benefit that we have of history, of knowing that there's no way that you're really going to be accepted in this society, even when you do achieve levels of excellence. They'll be mad at you just for doing that. They don't want you to do that. once you caught up, they get pissed off because you're great, and then they change the rules around that. So it's just, I just think he was just a victim of the times.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I'm not even, I don't need to be, I'm very sympathetic. I'm fascinated because I've always loved this book, and I've always loved my memory of what I learned in this book. And it's just going back with this recent work study circle and rereading it. And again, years ago, the Creel part didn't sink in. So the fact that he was literally on a George Creel press boat is to me fascinating, and yet another level of his engagement at the upper levels of the pro war propaganda at the time. And again, I'm not even saying that to condemn him. I get your point about the it's just fascinating. Anyway,
I mean, we can, just through Du Bois alone, we could see the evolution of our thought of us right now, of us who we are, how we kind of got to where we are. We literally, well, not literally, I know you say that we use that word, out of place. We are virtually standing on the shoulders of those who came before us ideologically. People like Du Bois is one of those people. And I think just looking at his life, and again, going back and looking at his catalog, so to speak, you can see the trajectory of that evolution.
That's right.
Literally, I mean, through his work. Now, literally, you can see that through his works and through his thoughts.
Right on. Right on. So very good. Okay. So now again, I don't think you answered the question. Did you have anything that you wanted us to get to this morning? Because before I keep going on my list.
I can't. My laptop died, which is what happened. What had happened, and I forgot to bring my. I'm not at home. I forgot to bring my charger, so it would have been on there. So I can't share it. So,
but if there's a topic or I can share it, just let me know. Otherwise, whatever, we can come back to it, or I'm sure the issues will repeat. I did want to add. So did you have? I know I'm late to this, but did you watch Squid Game? Did you get into that at all?
So man, I tried. So I was going to watch it last night. And I tried like 3 different times, and I just kept falling asleep, man. Because I wanted to do it last night because I wanted it to be fresh. I caught probably the first 15 minutes or so, and I just kept falling asleep, man. I just,
okay.
I hope that's not an indication of how exciting or not it is. Obviously, people love it, so I was like, I'm gonna hold on and check it out. But no, I didn't get a chance to really watch it. I saw kind of like him, I guess, on the playground and talking about how it started. Because at first, when I saw the thumbnail, I was like, is this like some Roblox, some Robux kind of thing like my kids play? Because it looked like that's what it was. And I was like, I don't know about this. When I started to watch it, I was like, okay. And then I saw that piece about how he explained what Squid Game is, and they play this little game and they jump from one place to the other. And one is on one foot, another. you know, and there's all this other stuff. That's about as much as I remember. And then after that, I was just like, you know.
Well,
and I
definitely
saw
goes,
the guy. I saw the people chasing him around and cutting him up and stuff and beating him up.
Look,
I saw that.
So for me, I am definitely getting soft in my old age because I struggled to watch it because of the violence and the trauma involved in the games. I was like, this is traumatic. And I was, you know, I'm watching it. I'm like getting all anxious and sweaty, and I'm like stressed out, you know, and just thinking about the psychological trauma of watching people being just killed all around you as you try to play these games to try to win this money. So I don't. The only reason I watched it. I thought it was the points that were fascinating for me was that it's in South Korea, which is supposed to be the pro-American, pro-Western, pro-capitalist utopian version of Korea, as opposed to the nightmare of the North. And yet the whole point is people are so desperately poor and marginalized and isolated and depressed that they're willing to risk their lives, literally, and to not even risk their lives because the Cornel West theory used to have a song that asked this question, and I can't remember who asked it politically before it, but in their song "Would You Kill," they're asking a question, or as I remember it, they're raising a question. It's not who you would or what you would die for; it's what or who you would kill for, and it's so much easier for us to talk about what we would die for and not to talk about what we would kill for. So the other part of the trauma for me is to watch people having to decide and become comfortable with, I got to kill these other people to win, because there's only going to be one winner. And you can only win by surviving. So to get to the point where it's not a question of I'm willing to die for this, but it's a question of I'm willing to kill every single person in this room, if necessary, is, you know, to survive, because the alternative of going back into society is worse. And the whole way they play on, because even after players get brought into this game and are given a chance to leave and go back to society, many of them, or if not all of them, were willing to come back to risk their lives because they realized that the alternative was no better, which reminded me of that brief time I was doing counter recruitment work. And this brother told me I would rather risk my life in a war zone overseas where I have the promise of healthcare and a college education, as opposed to the daily risk of life that I experience here for nothing. And it's like, so I'm sitting there, I'm watching this, and I'm like, the violence is traumatic. I don't like watching that anymore. I can't take it anymore. It's just too much. But the whole point of this is the country that the United States supported.
Well, again, you know, like we talked about,
this is the best they get.
But like we talked about with South Africa, you know, many of these countries that are deemed, you know, okay or diplomatic or democratic, whatever, by this country are the ones that have the same issues that this country has. You know, they don't particularly like the countries that have, you know, free healthcare, but the countries where there are people of color who have free healthcare and government run, you know, this and that, public services in the commons. You know, they tend to you know, categorize these kind of countries as being dictatorships and so forth, which is what we see very often. You know, and what you were saying about Korea and the romanticization of it reminded me, one time I was in an Uber pool with some people, and one of the people was a woman from South Korea, and she was coming back and she was complaining about, you know, Korea. And I thought, she said, we got to talking, and she said she was from South Korea. And I said, and the way she was complaining, I said, are you from North Korea or South Korea? Because I thought, because as much, and I just wanted to be clear, because as much as I hear, you know, all the negativity about North Korea, she had to be talking about North Korea. And she said no, and she went on and complained. She talked about Samsung and how Samsung is running the country and how it's only like a handful of people handful of families have all the wealth. You know, there's all kind of squalor. There's all kinds of poverty. There's all kinds of violence that we don't hear about, and we never hear about that kind of stuff. What you're talking about, I don't know if it goes as far as in this movie or this TV show, but I think the TV show definitely shows us a side of South Korea that we don't normally hear, because it's been sanitized, you know, by the West, you know, because they have to hold them up as being the exemplars of democracy and civilization, so to speak, over there, vis-a-vis North Korea.
So they do, and this is one of the things I found most fascinating, and what kept me watching the series was that you get a lot of indirect commentary on South Korea, on capitalism, on immigration, on class, on gender, on, I mean, they deal with a lot in here. It's just that for me and my softening sensibilities, just all this aggressive violence and trauma is so the reason I pulled this picture up here is because, and here I'm riffing off of something I got from the very liberal and probably like standard liberal white feminist YouTube channel, The Take, which actually does some things on pop culture that I find enjoyable to watch. And they made this point that I think is actually correct.
Well, that sounds like the Lifetime movie network of internet of YouTube.
Exactly.
So basically, you watch the Lifetime network of internet. Okay. Of YouTube. Okay.
And right. I do. I it's one of the things I rotate, because it's one of the ways I keep up with what's happening in pop culture.
Right.
And again, I don't agree all the time with their analysis, but I do enjoy it. But one of the points that I do agree with is, so here in this picture, for those, and spoiler if anybody cares, but 218, number 218 here, and number 456 number, the guy here becomes the winner, and he's pitted against his old friend from childhood, number 218 here at the end, who proves to be the most ruthless person. Now, The Take makes this point, and I agree with, because what Squid Game does is gives you this great critique of capitalism, this great critique of the failures of South Korean society, all that kind of stuff that the West, I'm sure, is happy is being suppressed under all the sensational violence, so that maybe people will miss the point. But what they fail in is that by having 456 win, you come back to the old Hollywood style fantasy tropes instead of staying committed to your project, where 218 should have been the winner. Because the point is, 218 is the most cold, calculating, vicious, willing to do whatever, kill whoever, lie to whoever, manipulate whoever. And he goes through and he does all these thoroughly shady things to position himself to become the victor, only to be brought back and defeated in the end by some silly plot convenient nonsense that allows 456 to win, so that we, the audience, can somehow feel better that the good guy wins. But that shouldn't have been because if you're trying to show the critique of capitalism and you do so well through all of these episodes, the good guy can't win. You got to have 218 come out on top, and that's how it should have ended. And even if you wanted to set something up for a successive season, you could have done that easily by a slight rewrite or a different direction. But that, to me, was the biggest failure of the whole thing, because at the end, I'm saying the same thing. Like, this dude has to win. There's no way 456 would defeat this guy in a real, and life winner take all battle, because 218, the dude is too vicious and was smart and calculated and plotting his whole thing. Anyway, he should have won, and it would have made him an even better point about to critique capitalism and the failures of Western intervention in that region of the world. But anyway, the last thing I'm saying is that
just real quick on that point, if the person that you say should have won would have won, then we wouldn't be seeing this show, because they wouldn't have allowed it to be made. They had to make that concession. And I think the violence is almost a connected point, is a necessary evil. And again, in order for it to be, to get some airplay, because, Western directors and so forth, they believe that, and maybe rightly so, that the Western audiences have to be, and maybe not so Western, just audiences in general now, have to be primed by some level of violence in order just to keep them interested, because the larger points that are being made may be considered a little bit too boring. I don't know. Maybe that's why I fell asleep. I ain't seeing the fire.
Hey, maybe. I mean, but,
it was past my bedtime. I was sleeping.
Well, that's I definitely start earlier.
We're boomers.
That's it.
We're boomers. You know, we get up at 4 o'clock in the morning for nothing.
That's why when BPM was like, when you want to do your show, I was like, in the morning, man. I was like, 8 a.m. is late. I was like, can I start my show at 4? Like, let's get it cracking already. Like, it's, you know, but to your point, I mean, this is one of my notes here, is that I think that just like I've been, you know, arguing about the Jordan Peele stuff and all that, like Get Out and all that, like this is the only way we can get any substantive critique of the world in these pop cultural products, is if there's sensationalized violence and trauma and all that stuff involved. And then, by the way, I mean, they even show, like, I mean, it's a South Korean thing, but then they even do the whole, you know, you see the white European investors involvement. I mean, they do a lot here, man. They do a lot with the sexual abuse that comes with colonial power and slavery. I mean, they I don't know. So anyway, I just, you know,
I'll check it out.
You know, so anyway, that was just that. All right. So moving on here. So next on my list of things so one thing I've been trying to do better at following labor struggles going on in this country, because I actually find them to be fascinating and admittedly even inspirational. And one of the pieces that I saw is this around John Deere strike. Oh, dang, how did this get? I can't get it. Where did this come from? Oh, take me back. Okay. And of course, many people know John Deere makes a lot of the tractors and stuff. Now, a lot of us are more familiar with John Deere because of our critique of their support with equipment and finance and politics of Israel. A lot of their equipment is used to bulldoze Palestinian homes and whatnot. But so on the one hand, they're, you know, internationally, they're being used to abuse, colonize and oppress people. And then even within the domestic colony, they're abusing their own employees who have been engaged in a nearly, as it says here, a month-long strike by more than 10,000 workers in Iowa, Illinois, and other states. And it's at a critical turning point. Now, this is so on the one hand, I'm inspired by the fact that working people are organizing and struggling for their rights to earn and benefit from all the wealth they're producing their bosses. But where it becomes a little bit disappointing and depressing even is at apparently what is the complicity of union leadership at siding with the corporate elite. So on the one hand, the walkout of these workers has caused serious delays in the shipment of replacement parts for farmers that they need to replace their Deere equipment. But then it says here, after the contract was defeated, management announced it was stepping up its strike-breaking customer service continuity plan. I love that labeling. It's not strike-breaking, it's a customer service continuity plan, which includes deploying supervisors, engineers, and other salaried workers to its facilities and ramping up production at factories outside the United States. So same old plan. Workers strike or advocate for more rights and benefits here, and the companies export their business to exploit workers overseas. But then even worse is that the United Auto Workers has imposed a complete information blackout on Deere workers and has not even acknowledged any of its closed doors discussions with Deere bosses. Meanwhile, it's continuing to keep Deere workers on starvation rations of $275 a week in strike benefits, despite a strike fund paid for with workers' dues valued at nearly $800 million. There is no doubt that UAW officials are plotting with corporate management to wear down the resistance of workers and force a revote on the same deal, or a slightly modified one that still fails to meet workers' demands. With Deere expected to rake in nearly $6 billion in profits this year, at least 62% more than its previous record in 2013, striking workers are determined to secure a $10 an hour raise to offset more than 25 years of UAW-backed wage concessions and protect their families from rising cost of fuel, food, and other basic necessities. They also want to restore fully paid retiree health care benefits for every generation of workers, which the UAW gave up in 1997. Even worse, the UAW is determined. This article concludes, and by the way, let me back up and just remind, this is from the World Socialist Web, Jerry White, written 3 days ago, published 3 days ago. But this is the part. The UAW is determined not to win the strike, but to defeat it. The union is not determined to win the strike. The union leadership is determined to defeat it. UAW President Ray Curry, Vice President Chuck Browning, and the rest of the affluent business executives at the UAW Solidarity House headquarters know a victory for Deere workers would spark a far wider rank-and-file rebellion against the UAW. Workers at Caterpillar, Volvo, and Mack Trucks, and GM, Ford, and Stellantis, at auto parts suppliers Dana, Faurecia, and Lear, and countless other locations all work under contracts with divisive tiered wage and benefit systems and other oppressive conditions imposed by the same bribe-taking UAW officials through lies, threats of job losses, and outright vote rigging. So in other words, I mean, that's it's again, the UAW is determined not to win the strike, but to defeat it, because they know a victory for Deere workers would spark a far wider rank and file rebellion against the UAW.
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly don't even know what to say.
I mean, and I just sent you something too, you know, just in relationship to black farmers, because they've been boycotting John Deere because they won't display at their conferences. You know, and that's just another issue that the black farmers, I mean, black farmers have had issues with, you know, governmental organizations over funds and so forth. Remember the whole situation with Sherry Sherrod, where they punked Obama, you know, into firing her without cause, really. But it didn't take much, you know, to punk Obama. All it took is some white folks, even a plumber who wasn't even a real plumber. But anyway, they had been fighting against them for a while. And yeah, I see you got it up there now. So, you know, just another, you know, not a real big story in terms of politics, but it just shows how John Deere's got some issues just across the board, not just with their own folk, but even with black farmers and black folks as well. So, yeah.
And I mean, and for me, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's all. Unfortunately, well, it's all, I guess it's all standard and routine. It just bothers me so much to read that union leadership,
yeah. I mean, they
doesn't even really want to win.
But I mean, it's not, you know, that's kind of like what they've been doing. A lot of unions have been doing for quite some time. I remember we talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago dealing with the unions. I forgot his name, but we were talking about, you know, some of the issues.
Francis Ryan. Yep.
Francis Ryan and not April Ryan, but Francis Ryan. I was like, April Ryan.
I sure did say that too. I was like,
but we had April.
Oh no, that
Silver,
was the April Silver. That was the other. That was the mistake I was making. I said April Ryan instead of April Silver. You were like, huh? And I was like, huh? Of course, huh? Because that would have been.
Yeah, that would have been crazy. But yeah, man. I mean, John Deere is just you know, just a typical company, and it's and the unions are just doing. And it's really amazing, man, how even, you know, groups that are supposed to be for the people get corrupted. And in a small ways, it's kind of like what happens with governments that sometimes start off as revolutionary, and then, you know, they tend to get have gotten co-opted, with the money. The unions, the same. It's just on a smaller scale. They do the same thing with the unions. So we're seeing what they do.
I thought that was the anti-union argument that people would make, that if you unionize, it will end up hurting the other workers who, whether they want to join the union or not. And then the unionists are supposed to say, no, even people who don't join the union benefit from us having a union, and they're more protected and get greater benefits, even though they're not part of the union. So then to have the union leadership saying, or behaving like we don't want to win because we don't want it's just, and the point should be that if a strike in one sector would reverberate in others, that's supposed to be strength for the working people, not as a sign of why you shouldn't do it. But maybe I'm missing something, or just missing a bunch of stuff. I don't know.
Well, you got politics, involved with these unions, and I think that's part of the problem. I think another part of the problem is these people getting these high wages for being union leaders. Because again, you get that money involved, and then you get the politics involved. That's not a good elixir. It's kind of like another Squid Game, so to speak. Except the violence is more political violence. Just in the strict sense, not necessarily, assassination, even though ideas and things of that nature get assassinated, so to speak. But you pretty much get the same type of mechanism in place, is that corruption. When you get that money involved, it just it messes things up. And speaking of that in politics, I did want to bring up these one of the stories I wanted to bring up was the red wave that took place last week with those elections. With especially like here in Virginia, that was like a really big one. People blaming critical race theory and things like that. A lot of these white people that voted for Biden, the suburban whites, and these are not Billy Bobs, but the suburban whites, flipped pretty much and went red. And to your point, now people were talking about critical race theory, but the reality is that people are not getting policies that they want. I mean, that might have been a part of it, but I think for the most part, people aren't getting the housing, they aren't getting the health care, they're not getting the job security, that some of these other that they need. They're not getting real policies. All they're getting is January 6th, Trump. They're talking about January 6th, but they're not talking about the fact that the guy that actually was behind a lot of this Russiagate stuff, got indicted and arrested, for lying about the whole thing. We're not hearing a whole lot about that, but almost every day you're talking about, prosecuting this guy who was with Trump and who led to January 6th and so on and so forth. So we're starting to see people, again, just much like the unions, imploding because they're not actually doing for the people what the people actually want and need. And the poll after poll continues to show that people want health. Even people on the right want health. They want universal health care. They want job security, basic stuff like that we as Africans never really got in this country. But they're starting to see that stuff is being taken away from them slowly but surely. And a lot of these jobs are outsourced, and a lot of these companies, with these shady practices, like the John Deeres of the world. So we're starting to see. Yeah, go ahead.
No, to your point, and I'm not going to play the sound, but I just want to pull this up here. Is that on what is it, on Breaking Points with what's his name, Sagar and Crystal Ball.
Yeah, your cousin.
My cousin, right? They brought this up, and I thought it raised a really interesting point, that while all this discussion and argument around critical race theory was thrown into the mix, obviously it was not done with any substantive, meaningful purposes. But what they showed is that in apparently this is a recent, is this the poll they were referencing? But they were referencing a recent poll that showed, to the extent that it could be trusted, that most people in this country, let's see, well, this part says, 42% of Americans never even heard of critical race theory. and that when they went into some of the numbers, they were showing that only 7% of the people polled in this country apparently are worried about how race is taught in schools at all. And a bulk of that 7%, they said, were more concerned that race wasn't taught enough or accurately enough in public schools. In other words, that nobody in the country was worried about critical race theory until it was thrown out as an issue to distract people and confuse people, so that these other issues that you're raising could go on with less attention. So I thought that was, I actually thought that was pretty interesting.
And the main people doing that are Democrats and Democratic arteries, like MSNBC and CNN. So they don't really care about, you know, the true history of this country being taught. Otherwise, they would have been talking about it on their programs. They never taught, but they know that for their base, that's red meat. And again, that's the, you know, so that can cause, you know, more division in terms of that. Not to say that it's already not divided. I'm not speaking up for that, but I'm just simply saying it's not done in good faith. They're not saying that. They're not bringing these things up because, you know, they care so much about our history being told properly. It's really because it was a political move, and it was a political move that ended up backfiring. And now they're starting to blame, you know, the critical race theory. To your point, raising the point that they made, it's not even something that people are even thinking about a whole lot. And then I just sent you another thing too, in terms of something that people are thinking about. Unfortunately, my laptop's not working, so I had to send it to you. I was going to just share it, but there's been a settlement with the Flint water crisis, a $626 million settlement there in Flint. And the crazy thing is that, you know, the judge said,
wait, are they cleaning the water though, or they just? I mean,
that's what I was getting to. That's what you see now. You're doing it. You're doing it. So they reached the settlement. You know, they said the judge said this is remarkable. You know, again, it's the same thing when we talk about critical race theory. They're just kind of redirecting the narrative. You know, the judge is saying how remarkable it is. It was announced in August 2020. And then they were going to, you know, they had to work out all the details, and they finally worked out all the details. And then they said attorneys have been seeking as much as 200 million. That's from NPR. And so I went through it, and I read some other articles as well. But again, you know, no news about like what they're actually going to do in terms of actually cleaning the water and making sure that this doesn't happen again. But they always, just like the police have a slush fund, these, you know, municipalities have slush funds for different things. And including lawsuits like this, where they can just shell off, you know, a couple, you know, whatever $1 million, whatever, for settlements and keep it moving. And at the same time, they're still not addressing. Now they did say that Flint switched back to the to Detroit, you know, regional water agency in 2015. But you know, they still are dealing with the pipes though. The problem was that they had lead pipes, old lead pipes. So no matter what source you're switching to, and this is not in the story, but they did say in the story that they switched back to the Detroit regional water, but they did not say that they changed the infrastructure, which I guess this build a bigger back. That's what I thought they were talking about. I thought your boy was talking about doing some pull-ups or doing some pull downs or something like that, or you know, some lat rows. That's what I thought he was talking about.
And this, I love that we didn't plan
build back better. But I thought he was talking about building a bigger back.
I love that we didn't plan this, because one of the stories I wanted to bring up is that to follow up on what Jackie did on her show yesterday, that all this build back better is tax cuts for the rich. So with the state and local tax, they're playing around. I honestly don't follow all the details. I just get to the conclusion, which is that the rich are about to get another tax break. And by the way, that total number for the infrastructure bill just keeps going down and down and down and down anyway. It's spread out over 10 years. So, I mean, it's such a little amount of money, especially given the amount they just spent, you know, for the war in Afghanistan and everywhere else. We're getting pennies on the dollar, and in part because the wealthy are, you know, getting another tax break.
Well, you know, the thing about it, they started around 6 billion, right? They started around 6 billion or so.
Trillion.
I'm sorry, trillion, 6 trillion. And people were talking about, there were some black pundits saying, oh, this is a whole lot of good stuff. I even saw some articles where people said that black people were going to get reparations like our reparations was going to be through this Build Back Better thing.
Oh my
right?
God.
Some people actually were saying that. And so, but they kept whittling it down and whittling it down now to the point where they're saying, well, at least, you know, we're not getting this. Okay, we're not going to get that. Okay, well, at least we're going to get infrastructure. But to your point, most of the people who are going to benefit from those infrastructure deals, contracts, are going to be the billionaires already. And so that's one of the big things that people who are into stocks and things, you know, they once they saw that Biden is in office, they said, okay, well, the infrastructure. Usually they say Republicans were really pushing the infrastructure, which is really why they actually were down with actually this particular version of it, because it more caters towards the people that fund them, which deal more with infrastructure. But it also benefits the Democrats in the sense that they could say that they got something done and it was bipartisan. But they don't, again, get into the details as to what exactly was done and who's going to benefit, you know, to the point of this article. And we see who's going to benefit.
So, yeah, absolutely. So check this out. So another thing, yeah, that's crazy, man. They are, anyway, but one of the reasons why this is so complicated and difficult to unearth is because of the slick way messaging is conveyed. So it's funny, in my sociology of mass media course this semester, we're reading this book by Thomas Glander on the which I really like, actually, Origins of Mass Communications Research During the American Cold War is the title of the book. And one of the points that is raised is the history of one of the considered founding fathers of American mass communication research, Paul Lazarsfeld, who is famous in media studies for coining the two-step communications theory, which was that, unlike the previous thought concept of the hypodermic needle theory, that media just, you just shove messaging in and people take it, that it's a little more complicated. Lazarsfeld's research said, humans and society is a little more complicated. It's a process. It's not just a one. And that, but his point was, with the two-step flow, was that people are more influenced. This is perfect for today's, why we brought it up in class, are more influenced not by direct messaging, but by messaging that's carried through what we would now call today influencers. Let me just adjust the curtain while the sun is coming through differently here. Let me just get that light out my face. Anyway, so I thought that point, I think, has been proven. If we're giving Lazarsfeld credit for that point, I think has been proven to be at least of some value. I know the theory is debated to this day, but at least has some value in the idea that people we like, people we find to be valuable or admirable, are influential in conveying messages for us, in delivering messages to us. And that issue, in a modern sense, came up again in this story from Telesur about U.S. financing subversion in Cuba through international awards. So again, instead of some sort of attempt at direct propaganda saying the Cuban Revolution is bad, socialism is bad, what the CIA apparently has been doing for a good number of decades now has been creating awards and funneling through prize money and the promotion of certain prominent figureheads and spokespeople, the dissemination of anti-revolution or anti-socialist messaging in Cuba and elsewhere. So, for instance, as this article points out, with the purpose of positioning her internationally, only a year after the release of her blog, the U.S. magazine Time selected her. And they're talking about Yoni Sanchez, who became a blogger after being recruited in Spain in 2004 by CIA agent Carlos Alberto Montaner. that Time magazine selected her in 2008 among 100 most influential people in the world, a fact repeated in 2021 with a local artist turned anti-government activist Luis Manuel Otero Alcantara. People magazine also chose Sanchez as one of the 25 most outstanding people in Latin America, actions that served as the basis to initiate a precipitous cascade of awards, something unparalleled in history of Latin American intellectual circles, the source said. So I just thought that this story was very interesting because you have CIA, you have USAID, often associated with CIA, you have Time magazine, you have People magazine, all brought into this. You have the National Endowment for Democracy and its association as a CIA cutout for years, involved in promoting this person here, Tania Bruguera, who was an anti-Cuban Revolution spokesperson, prominently placed spokesperson. And then they continue that this method of defraying actions to destroy the political stability of a country began with the well-known Sakharov Prize, awarded for the first time in 1988 by the European Parliament and given to alleged opponents of nations with governments not accepted by the United States. So anyway, I just, I thought of that again, and in conjunction with a book, shout out to John Paul Tash, who put me onto this so many years ago, and I keep bringing it up. Francis Stoner Saunders, The Cultural Cold War, and other, but the idea of and national security cinema, another book I've been referencing a lot lately. But this idea that pop culture, that magazines, television shows, awards, prizes, laudits, laudatory praise, plaudits, all of that stuff, whatever the word is, would be given to people not just because they're brilliant and talented and have offered the world something of value, but because they are taking decidedly anti-socialist, anti-progressive, anti-liberation positions in defense of Western empire. So,
and it's a way to influence, because these people are influencers, to influence other people to do the same. That kind of reminds me of that time we talked about the Cuban hip hop with Brother Two Black. And we were talking about how they use Cuban hip hop. I think it was USAID or one of the organizations that do those kinds of things. They do those kinds of the tours and things. And then again, when it comes to rewarding, that's the reason why Desmond Tutu would win the Nobel Prize, is because he was an influencer of sorts, and he's somebody that you want to be like this guy. So which is why Obama won the Nobel Prize, and he hadn't even done anything. So they were already telling him.
Remember, they said that
for what he could do, for what we believe he's going to do. Yeah. So I mean, but again, he did, right? I mean, from their view, he earned it by doing all the things that they want, and that's a classic tactic. I mean, that's like some Dale Carnegie stuff. Like you heap praise on people, and you tell them you're wonderful. You're going to be a wonderful such and such. You're going to do this or that, and then people get so used to the praise that they're like, yeah, I'm gonna be that, and then they start doing it. They start actually acting as if you desire.
A few years ago, my family and I were at The Hague and actually saw the Carnegie Peace House. Which again, Carnegie was, let's bring a world of peace under my white capitalist domination. Speaking of at least maybe not capitalist, but white domination, I did want to at least get to this a little bit because the defense rested yesterday in Kyle Rittenhouse's trial.
The tears.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought we would check this little
in the murder trial of Kyle
clip
Rittenhouse.
out real quick.
Closing arguments set for Monday.
Get caught up
in a divisive case that has captivated much of the nation, and then it'll be up to the jury.
And I love how this dude was brought over from Fox to see us at
17 years old.
How about that?
I like how they
Kenosha, Wisconsin, with an AR-15 rifle. Riots and racial justice protests were rocking the city after police shot a black man. Rittenhouse says he went there to protect the community. He ended up shooting 3 men, killed 2 of them.
I think he's going to get away with it, by the way. In this video, I think this summary
and attacked him. The defense's final witness was this man, Frank Hernandez. He recorded video of the first deadly shooting of Joseph Rosenbaum. Hernandez says he traveled the country last summer recording violent protests, and that's why he was in Kenosha. On that deadly night, he says he recorded Rosenbaum pushing around a flaming dumpster. See here? Hernandez says Rosenbaum became aggressive and confronted a group of men who came to the protest with assault-style rifles, just as Rittenhouse did. That's Rosenbaum there in the maroon shirt. Then later, he claims he saw Rosenbaum charge at Rittenhouse from behind and lunge at him before Rittenhouse wheeled around and opened fire. Hernandez said Rosenbaum was the aggressor that night, not Rittenhouse.
Did you observe him acting in an aggressive manner to anyone that you observed?
In no way, shape, or form. The first time I saw Kyle, he actually de-escalated a situation.
Did you observe him at any time that evening pointing his firearm at anybody or threatening anybody with that firearm?
No.
This is drone video of the Rosenbaum shooting. You can see him run up to Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse wheels around and opens fire right there. Shoots him 4 times, we're told. The last shot in the back, according to testimony. When the prosecution got their chance to cross-examine Hernandez, they questioned his credibility. NBC's Megan Fitzgerald is covering the trial in Kenosha and picks it up from there. Megan?
Yes, that prosecutors tried repeatedly to paint Hernandez as being biased. They even focused on the video that he shot, saying that he made disparaging remarks. Then they zeroed in on his social media account, specifically his Twitter account. I want you to take a listen to that back and forth.
Have you ever posted anything on social media?
Yes.
In support of Kyle Rittenhouse?
One could argue yes.
Now, also today, we're getting reaction to the moment that Kyle Rittenhouse took the witness stand yesterday when he broke down. We're hearing from Jacob Blake's uncle. Now, you'll remember Jacob Blake was the black man who was shot multiple times last summer, setting off those protests. His uncle told our Gabe Gutierrez that breaking down on the witness stand is something he called ridiculous. Take a listen.
Too little, too late. We believe people have seen the movie, seen the films that were taped that night. It's going to lead to him sitting on a bunk, and that's why I believe he broke down.
Now, tomorrow, jurors will not be back in court. They're not going to return until Monday. Attorneys will be back to discuss motion. Now, when the jury does come back on Monday, they're going to hear jury instructions as well as closing arguments. And then they're going to get the case to begin deliberations, Shep.
Yeah, I think so 2 things quickly. Why, how much attention, so was the case around the killing of Blake ever, was that wrapped up? I don't even remember that anymore.
He was the one that was shot in the back. He survived, right? He actually did survive. I think he got like a settlement or something.
Okay.
So I think I think there was a settlement with that particular situation. Yeah, but
the other thing is, I think that package right there doesn't look good for the prosecution. I mean, already, as we talked about on the remix yesterday or the other day, they're not allowed to call the jury, or they're not allowed to refer to Rosenbaum or the other victims as victims, so they can't be called victims. And that video of dude running up on him and then being shot as Rittenhouse turns around, I think that's.
Yeah, I never thought he was gonna. I never thought he was gonna actually get prosecuted. Well, he'd be convicted. I never thought he was gonna be convicted for that. But I do think they didn't even necessarily need to, the judge didn't even necessarily need to do what he did in terms of not allowing them to be called victims, the victims to be called victims. You know, because if there's no victim, then really there's no crime. Because if there's no crime, I mean, there's no crime. What are we doing here? Why are we even having or at least alleged victim? I mean, in order to stand trial, you have to at least have for murder, you have to at least have an alleged victim. Otherwise, murders mean that there's somebody so it's just. But again, this is America, so it's not going to make sense, when it comes to these kinds of things anyway. So, because who is really a victim is the question, and who's really the whatever. So, but when it comes to these kinds of things, but him wheeling around that video is definitely not a good sign for the prosecution. And it didn't even look like the prosecution was really trying to really win the case, with all it had, because the way that the jury was set up, they could have fought a little bit more for the jury to be more comprised of, more black folk, which they didn't do. And, kicking people off for minor stuff, like saying they smoke weed or something like that is just like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
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 And real quick,
yeah.
I wanted to talk about the brother who's Adams, who's now been elected mayor of New York.
Yeah.
And remember, I was talking about when we were talking about Chappelle, and I was saying how a lot of times the white vegans, they're silent about issues pertaining to black people, and I just use that as an example of how whatever group that you're in, whatever demographic, whatever, if you're black, as long as you told that particular line, whether it be your diet or your lifestyle or whatever, that's fine, but you just don't need to be talking about race. And so like I said, I follow a lot of vegan, plant-based things online just to kind of get ideas and things like that. And so all these white vegans say, oh yeah, this is great, we got a vegan mayor of New York. Yes. They didn't get into anything about his politics, anything about him being pro-police, anything, none of that. None of the fact that he's been backed by all these different, law enforcement, none of that. That which have been, the stop and frisk. They didn't deal with any of that, but they dealt with the fact that they're just happy that a vegan, because that's their number one concern. And their number one concern is veganism. That's their number one thing. So I just wanted to just kind of point that out and make that point around that they didn't even look into this man's politics. It doesn't matter as long as he's a vegan, and as long and to the extent that any black person is to talk about him, we are only to talk about, according to them, based as far as they're concerned, we're only to talk about him in the context of the veganism and how that's wonderful. And to the extent that we do say he's black, we will say, point out his blackness. It'll be like, he's a black vegan. This is great. And not necessarily his politics vis-a-vis black people and how black people's lives are going to be affected by his tenure as the mayor. So again, race is always subjugated when it comes to us, advocating for us, number one. And that's the point I made about Chappelle. And and so this actually came to light. This actually came to light, in this particular case with his brother won as the mayor of New York. And by the way, I would have preferred, if I were a New Yorker, I would have preferred Andrew Yang, but you see how the Democrats, basically sandbagged him and got him out of there real quick. He wasn't even in the running. Not saying that he's perfect, but if there's anybody that you would have wanted to try to get in terms of economics, at least, and some of his policies with the guaranteed income and things like that he was trying to push, it would have been somebody like that. But you see how the Democrats got him out of there.
So before we get out of here, there's one other thing I did want to get to. Just for one portion of this discussion. So as folks know, or may not, I am a fan of the rap battle world, and I've become increasingly a fan of the outlet of Math Hoffa. And in this discussion he had recently with Hasan Campbell, who has blown up recently, not only for being one of the more prominent people to come out and say that he was abused by Africa Bambaataa back in the day, but recently he's been involved with he's been beefing with a lot of people, like Kwame Brown and a whole bunch of other people. But in this discussion, this portion of the discussion, which we're not going to play much of, I'll put the link in the show notes. They're talking about Brother Polite and the charges of Brother Polite of sexual abuse of a minor. And Math and Hasan have a difference of opinion on, I'm just trying to set the context real quick, on whether there's on public discussion of alleged abuse by people in our community against our community. And Hasan is aggressively saying polite is guilty. Math, as someone who says he is a victim of false accusations, feels like he wants the courts to take care of this and get it out of the discussion of, you know, the streets and whatever. And I just want to play this last concluding part because they get to a point that is somewhat different from this, that I just found myself in disagreement with Math on. This other part, this other stuff, I'm not so interested in for this particular part of the discussion. I just want to just play this real quick.
They do, bro,
no,
because I'm tired of
we
this
also hold court too, because if the courts fail us, and in many cases the courts do fail, and these niggas come back into our community, then there's another child, and it's the mother did it too. Then there's another child. So at some point in time, we got to stop looking for the system to solve our problems. Just like, for example, right, with all these killings going on in the hood. And that's going to be part 2 because we ain't even get into that. We're going to wait for the courts to go get our nephews. Where's all the fathers at?
Absolutely. And that's the bottom line. Parents. Everything that we discussed tonight revolves around missing parents. Parents not being responsible when it comes to their kids.
In tune.
You're not going to make that mistake. I'm not going to make that mistake. And hopefully the people that's watching, y'all not gonna make that mistake. So we don't have to hear about this type of shit.
That's how we break the cycle.
That's how you break the cycle. Be the fucking parent.
All right, so that's all. That was the part. So I watched this whole thing. I love the whole discussion. The whole thing is fascinating. I encourage people to check it out. But when I hear that argument, I start to get I feel a kind of way. I don't agree with that. I think that's where I feel like these conversations start to walk away from the critical discussions we need to be having. The more I've experienced parenthood, the more I'm convinced, as I've jokingly said over the years, that parenting is an exercise in powerlessness, because you are confronted daily with the absence of power that parents have in relationship to dominant institutions in our society and to society as a whole. It is not enough to say that people who misbehave are the products of bad parenting. It is not enough to say that more parenting is an automatic solution to these massive problems. And it's not because people are not good parents that we find people in our communities in these horrific situations. Going back to something I've borrowed from Dr. King for years, yes, Black people committing crimes against other Black people is horrific and needs to be stopped and checked. Yes, I even agree that Black people need to be more involved in self-policing, communal policing, alternative policing, etc. But we cannot walk away from from realizing that you are not parenting in a vacuum. And parents are not all powerful in the raising or the conditioning of their children. In fact, quite the opposite. So even whether you engage in alternative schooling, homeschooling, or whatever, we're still in a society with dominant institutions that penetrate and pervade and influence and even reach our children through other people. So just like in the way we were describing the CIA intending to distribute messages happen consciously or not through other people. We can't stop our children from communicating with other people, even within our own families that we don't agree with, much less everybody else. So I just wanted to point that one thing out, that I don't like when those kinds of discussions end up with be a better parent to your child. Yes, obviously that's the case, but what look at all that inhibits us from being better parents to our children. So that's all I wanted to say.
That's the Bill Cosby, argument. I like to call it the pound cake, argument is the blaming the parents and not looking at the system that produces the fact that parents are underemployed, underhoused, don't have the resources. It presupposes that we live in a meritocracy where all we would have had to have done was just be law-abiding citizens. You mentioned Dr. King. I don't know how much more of a law-abiding citizen Dr. King was, and many others during those times, and we had to, you know, fight. And he even ended up dying at the hands of the government by its own admission. The government being found guilty of being at least complicit in his death in 1999. So we know that for a fact, the same government. But, you know, and then also that argument also implies that it makes parenting and it makes community, and it takes away community. It makes it an individual thing. To your point, like you were making, like, you know, the individual family, the nuclear family is not the be all end all. True family structure should require a whole community. You know, when we were coming up, Jared, I grew up in Florida, you grew up in Maryland, and black folk grew up wherever we grew up. We had more of a community situation. When I went to the corner store, you know, the brothers on the corner, you know, they looked out for me, you know, made sure hey, don't end up over here like me, that kind of thing. Even in that situation, there was more of a community, and we've lost a lot of that because of the incursion of a lot of these this so-called technology, which so-called social networks, which actually make us more antisocial than anything. It's actually more anti-social media and not social media. So what ends up happening is a lot of our people end up becoming, you know, divided, and they become despondent, and they become, you know, basically they're driven away from any notions of community, and because of this whole piece of individualism, going right back to one of the very first things we talked about with the Squid Game. The system creates a dog eat dog type mentality where people, again, individually believe that there's a zero-sum game, that I have to be the one on top, and that resources are limited, and there's not enough for everybody, and so therefore I gotta do what I gotta do, you know, the hell with anybody else, as opposed to, you know, the rich white kids that I grew up with. And I think I mentioned this before on the air, the kids that I knew that were doing the huffing and all that kind of stuff, that they could get away with it. It's not like where were their parents? You know, people always say, where are the parents? Where were their parents? Their parents was a doctor. Okay. And so, but a lot of these boys, to my grandmother who worked for them, you know, in my particular case, was as a domestic, told me, boy, you can't do that. You can't do what these two boys are doing, you know, because, you know, when the police pick them up, you know, they're going to take them home. You know, when the police pick me up, I'm going to jail.
Right.
You know,
right.
Because we live in a white supremacist society, and also a society, and even the white trash folk that I knew, when it comes to class is definitely there. But even the white trash people, you know, because when we talk about the disparities in sentencing, you know, they don't necessarily account for income or anything like that. It's based on race. So whether a person is in the upper class,
well, they do
lower class,
they do account for income as well, even within
well, they
world.
do,
but poor whites more than,
that's true. But still, you know, the rates for whites are much lower, you know, than blacks in terms of just
percentage of population,
percentage in terms of racial. So that's my point in general, is that it's more of an individual piece and not a communal piece.
Hiram makes a good point here, as does, which I could agree with, that battle rap is just hyper aggressive spoken word poetry for men. But then I also agree with
wrestling.
It's so hard to keep track of the comments. With Randall's point here, I think you're forgetting the women bar spitters out here making moves too, respectfully. So it could be argued that it's hyper aggressive. What did Hiram say? Hyper aggressive spoken word poetry for men and women, because the women get it in just the same way. Yeah, anyway, I got in the comments a little bit at the end here, just to see where you know, just a little bit.
I get in
the water too. A little bit.
I got in too, and let me be clear. I'm not saying that when I said Andrew Yang, I said if I were a voter, it would be better to deal with him than necessarily Adams.
Did people get at you for that?
Right. Just based on the economic piece that he was talking about in terms of that universal income. I'm not saying that Yang is, and I actually did say that he was, you know, he's got some issues. So I just want to be clear. I'm just saying if you were going to, you know, if you're going to play the game, and I always make that caveat, you know, if you're going to play the political game, then, you know, you got to, you know, make better choices.
This is an interesting point. Math and all of them guys in the barbershop would have blatantly disobeyed their parents, ran out in the streets and did dirt. We need community.
and just didn't get caught, or, you know, some people just didn't get caught, and then learn later, you know, what they needed to do.
Oh, that's deep. Pro-white caused major damage to young people looking for Africans. Yeah, polite was yeah. Anyway, and look, that interview is pretty deep. This is one of the better discussions I've seen so far with Hasan Campbell, to be honest, because he acknowledges himself as a disturbed individual, and when you hear him explain what he has gone through, how could he not be? You know, to have and be imprisoned on multiple occasions, involved with at least alleged murders, have been molested by Bambaataa as a child. I mean, all these kinds of things, and I think other people too. I don't think Bambaataa was the only one. You know, and never mind just general living in blackness and poverty in the Bronx. I mean, I think that would be enough to you know.
Excuses. You're making
you know,
excuses.
Right? I know. My bad. Yeah. Anyway, you know, just pull your pants up and fix your name and comb your hair, wag my finger. Yeah. All right, everybody, Brother Kaba, I really appreciate you coming through again. Everybody, make sure to go back to WPFW.org and get the archives for his show Mondays 3 to 5 p.m. African Deep Thought edition of Jazz and Justice. Please click the bell and make sure you like, join, and subscribe here, because there's a lot of great stuff happening on the channel later today with the Riot Starter. We do allow and even encourage people to step away from our channel briefly to check out Burn It Down with Kim Brown, and then come on back for Uncle Devin's kids show Saturday, Warrior Class, Sundays with Ear Doctor. A lot of great stuff coming up, and more surprises that I don't even know about. So please continue to stick around and support the channel as we continue to grow. Please do check out the interview I did with Brother Sundiata last night on Real Talk. It was a lot of fun. And you know, we'll catch you next time.
And the last shot on Veterans Day. I know you don't want to deal too much with Veterans Day. I don't know what your rank was in the Navy, but no matter what, E4.
I got out of E4.
I was an E4 too. That's a specialist in the Army. I was an E4.
For me, it was just a third-class petty officer, and I think that
that's what I was going to say. You hit right on the head. I think you were first-class petty officer, and you've proven that over the years with the petty. So I appreciate you. We're there, brother.
We there.
Peace, and I'm willing to fight for it.
Peace, because we're the fight for, like Fred used to say, yeah, petty or not. He didn't say what level. He didn't say petty or not. You know, you got to fight. Just fight for it. Anyway, catch you next time. Peace, everybody. Thanks again.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like.